I know what you're thinking. Another podcast. Why? You see, for me, I'm hoping that through this podcast, I'll be able to have my own personal connection that I can be able to learn from, that can inspire me, and hopefully in the process can be able to inspire other people like me. You see, I've been a creative. I've been in this space as a creative for the last 17 years. And in this time, I've been able to experience extreme highs, to be in videos like For King and Country, who are Grammy Award winners. I've been able to get shout outs from guys like Toby Mac. I've been able to go on stage with guys like Pompey and Mag 44. I've been able to be in music videos by guys like Christopher. Locally, I've been able to work with some amazing Christian artists like Alice Kimanzi. I've been able to go on stage with guys like Justin Ritchie, amazing actors. I've experienced quite some highs. But one of the things that also people don't see behind the scenes, people don't see on social media when I post trips to Germany and mission tours to Germany, is the struggle. What people don't see is the failure. When you doubt yourself, when you're not so sure about the things that can make you quit, the times that you want to give up, the times that you're feeling, am I good enough? The times that you're asking yourself questions like, will I survive this? What people don't see is the period when I had to leave home because I couldn't pay rent and I had to be hosted by a family member. The pain, the struggle, the tears, and all these things. And so for me, one of the things I'm hoping that through this podcast I'll be able to do is that I will be able to sit down and have conversations with visionaries. It doesn't just have to be the people who are big names. Even if it's just someone who is starting out today and they're in their process of moving forward, because I want to be able to know, what do you do when you feel stuck? What do you do when you're celebrating? What do you do when you're in pain? What do you do when you want to give up? What do you do when you don't have money? And that's what this podcast is about. It's about learning, it's about growth. I want to be able to face my fears through this podcast. Like many people, I've also been worrying, what will people think when I start something new? You'd think that after 17 years being unique, being weird, it gets easier, but it really does not. And so through this podcast, I am facing my fears. This is a dream I've had for the last 4 years. And for so many reasons, I've always had reason not to start a podcast. Do I have the right equipment? Do I have the right lights? Is my phone enough? I'm able to keep the quality that I'm seeing on social media. Something else that I'm hoping to do, like I've said earlier, is I'm hoping that I'll be able to learn from others. I'm hoping that through this podcast, I can sit down with people and from their journeys, I can become a better person. I'm hoping that I can be inspired, and hopefully even as people who are about to quit, I'm hoping that this will help you to keep on moving forward. For me, one of the podcasts that really changed my life was How I Built This by Guy Raz. I remember in 2021, while I was just at the depth of depth, wanting to give up, not trying to give up, and I was listening to this podcast by visionaries, and just listening to them helped me realize, just because they're in a different field, the struggles are almost always the same. And that gave me a kicker to start. And I can say that that was one of the many things that became a highlight for my life. And so I'm hoping that from this podcast, I can be able to grow in business, grow in my networks, that I can be able to also grow as a brand, as a moderator, as an MC. And when all is said and done, I hope that I can be a better person. And so am I doing this podcast because I have so much information to offer? Nope. I'm doing this podcast because just like you, I want to learn, and I hope that I can be able to engage with others. And so this podcast is not by a wise man giving wise tips. Probably some of you listening to this podcast are better off at entrepreneurship than I am. Some of you probably have better lives than I do. So this is not a podcast where I'm coming to give you guys advice, but this is a podcast of someone who wants to learn. And so if you're a believer, if you're a visionary, if you're a dreamer, and you're like me, you're trying to seek answers, if you belong to the 20% who do not want to quit, but you're trying to find answers and you don't know where to start, then wherever you are, welcome to the Believe, Become, Inspire podcast. A podcast where we dive deep into the lives of visionaries, of dreamers, and of people who have already started. My name is Samuregz, and I will be your host in this journey. So, leaving campus, like many people, I had this really big dream. I wanted to be able to have my own organization, I wanted to have impact in this world. I just wanted to do a lot of things. And on top of that, I know I also wanted to make a lot of money. And I hoped that I will be able to use my faith. I hope that I will be able to use my gifts and my education so that I could be able to be the change maker that I have always desired to be. And my mission statement after university became to initiate change, to give hope, and to inspire. And that is the mission statement that has guided my life from university up to this point. But why did I have such a desire? Why did I have such a mission in life? To understand this, we have to go all the way back to my childhood days. And my earliest memory starts from a school in Kitale called Robinson's Academy. That school changed. It's no longer there. I think it died at some point. But that was where my first initial memory of life is. In this school, we used to have this thing at the end of every term where we would have like a small dance competition where the lower primary schools and the upper primary schools would have different kinds of competition. We'd all be lumped together in a hall and we'd just have fun. And then music will be played and the top three will receive a prize. Now, to the best of my knowledge, I was always among the top three. And it's because I used to have this one specific move that I used to go back to. And this move was taught at that point by one of my uncles called Uncle Derito. And I remember how he would stay in the living room and he would teach me. It was a side step, but I used to do it with so much energy. And then you're this cute little boy just jumping up and down on that stage, on that floor. And what that did was it in a way just gave me that freedom to express myself. And again, when most of the times you're among the top three, you gain some level of confidence. That memory of dance as a child is one of the memories that had been locked somewhere in my mind that I'd some point even forgotten about. And then I had to change schools in I think it was class 4 there, and I went to this school called Kitale Academy. Now, I loved that school. I loved it because of the friends I had. I loved it because it was just amazing. But the one major difference in Kitale Academy was I stopped dancing. And that went on. Like, I stopped dancing all the way from that school till I had to change schools I believe it was in class 7, because we had moved from Kitale to Nakuru. Mimi niliachwa Kitale for about a year, and in that period my education started to go down. For context, I was a very bright student as a child, and so when my parents saw that my education was being affected, they were like, nope, you have to come back home. The other thing that was being affected with me being in boarding school was I started being skinny. Now you can imagine being short and skinny. That's not a really good combination. And so my parents looked at me and they were like, you'll die. So they took me to a school called Moi Primary School in Nakuru. And I don't have a lot of memories of that school, if I'm to be honest with you. I didn't want to go there. I missed my friends in Kitale, and so my education actually took a major dip to a point that I had to choose to take a step back and repeat class 8. Class 8 at that point was where you came from primary school to secondary school. I remember just looking at my grades, I was like, I can't go here. And I chose to repeat. The good thing about my dad is my dad has always been the kind of dad who gives you options. He's like, so do you want to keep on moving forward with these grades and you'll probably not get the best of schools, or do you want to go back and try get good grades? And I chose to take a step back. Now, the school I went to was called Good Samaritan Academy. Other than being woken up at ungodly hours to do jogging, I'm not a morning person. I don't remember much about this school. Again, this has nothing to do with the school. It's just that when you repeat, it does something to your mind. It does something to your esteem. And I remember that I became so focused on education that I pretty much didn't have any other life. This is one of those schools where I remember a handful of people. Again, this was mostly down to me with the fact that I did not want to go through that pain of repeating again. Class 8, that was the first time I had a real taste of what failure looked like. And now we're in high school. I loved high school and hated high school at the same time. I loved it because it was vibes. I had probably some of the best moments there, but then I also had some of my low moments in that school. And one of my low moments was I used to love b-ball. Now, if you have ever seen me, I am not the tallest guy on this earth. But the one thing I loved doing, I was a really good three-pointer. And this was before Steph Curry. Maybe I was just born in the wrong generation. Maybe if I was born in this generation, I'd be, in the school teams then. I remember when we were playing ball during trips, sometimes I'd be cut off from the team. In that period, I remember that element of failure was quite disturbing, to be honest, because it was one of those times where I really looked at my height. I don't think I'd looked at my height so much before that, but that was the first time I was like, no matter how good I am, it's always going to be favoring people on the other end of the spectrum. And so got through high school, which was amazing. And then the one thing that I also credit high school for when it comes to my dance journey is my flexibility. Because one of the things about basketball is you do a lot of practice, you do a lot of stretches. And what that did was it helped to really improve my flexibility. I didn't know it at that point. And so by the time I was coming to the post finishing high school, there's this period where in our time we used to have 1 year where you're staying at home. And in that period, that's the time I got saved. I remember I came from school, and the first Sunday, this really beautiful girl comes and they're like, we normally have practice for music on Wednesday. And to be honest, I didn't go for practice because of music. I went to practice because of the girl, how the Lord can sometimes use your stupidity for his glory. That is what he did for me. And over time, I started to develop a love for the arts. For me, it started with music, where I used to sing, and there's this song that was good at that point. Looking back, I will probably not sing it again, but it's Storm is over now. Woo! And I remember being called R. Kelly by these girls. It felt nice. Felt really good. But one of the things that I feel and I believe God did was he used my love for music to draw me close to him. And it's in this season of just going to do practice. Remember, nilianza kwenda kanisa sababu ya msichana, but ended up doing it for the love of music. I wasn't saved, honestly, at this point. And it was a double life because during the Sunday service, I'd go lead worship with the team. And then after church, miniko hapo, going for dunda. I remember at that point, it was called Club Dimples. But around April, if I remember well, around April, I decided to give my life to Christ. And the first major decision I made, because I still remember this, I got saved on a Sunday. And on Monday, I don't know what's the thing about my seasons and new phones, but on a Monday, I went got a new phone. It was I remember it was Motorola L7. Kwa wale ambao wanakumbuka hizo simu, Motorola L7. And then hata simu haikuwa unpackaged. I went to this group. It was called the Kenya Youth for Christ. And these guys were doing practice. And I was just sitting over there looking confused with my phone. And then two guys. Now, again, I don't know why the Lord decided to bring the tallest people on this earth to just be my friends. That was how I was introduced into dance, because I found them practicing. Now, disclaimer, we were not the coolest of dancers ever. If I was to show you the dances that we used to do, you'd die laughing. That's how not so good we were. But then in my time with the Kenya Youth for Christ, we went for a mission in Eldoret. And while we were on this mission, I remember seeing this. I remember seeing these dancers. They were from the KYFC Eldoret. Some of them ended up being in this group called Gospel Warriors. We met in Sparfest a few years later. And there was this one guy, I still remember his name. He's called Victor. Victor did a head spin kwa nyasi. Now, for context, we were at a time when we didn't have YouTube in our homes. For you to see YouTube, you'd have to go to a cyber cafe and spend your money so that you can actually see a few things on YouTube. And so for me, I used to know that these dance things, the extra dance things, is for guys abroad. It's not for us Kenyans. So going there and seeing this guy doing a head spin kwa nyasi, later on in their performances, I still remember it was a Lingala performance that was sleek, it was synchronized, it was energetic. And I came back to Nakuru and I had this fire to grow. And so I used to watch dance movies before. Again, to learn dance, it was dance movies, not YouTube. But I came back and I now, instead of just watching them, I started to study them. For the guys who remember, there was Tomp the Yard, there was You Got Served, there was Step Up to the Street, there was Street Dance, and some of my favorite dancers, as in most people look at some of these dancers, like I remember I had a friend whose favorite dancer was Twitch. For me, my favorite dancer was Moose. The thing I liked about Moose was not your typical, stereotypical guy. He was not built, he was not jacked, he was not big. He was goofy. He had a slender body, but he could dance, he could move. And it was just amazing. This was Step Up. Like there was a series of Step Up to the Street, Step Up Revolution. I believe there were 4. And I started just studying them. I started, like I would literally do play, pause. I think I even ruined our DVD player because of just constantly playing and pausing. Our CDs were scratched quite badly back then. And that's how I got to learn about this. And then there was this show, it was called America's Best Dance Crew. That's also something else that really inspired my dancing. There were crews there like the Jabberwockies, there was Kaba Modern. These are the crews that really inspired me. These are the guys that really influenced my style of dance at that point. Speaking of ABDC, this is just a side note. One of the leaders of Super Crew, I think they were the season 3 winners, liked my post on Instagram about 10 years ago. I was over the moon. Also, music back then was heavily influenced with dance, but then the dance was more synchronized and more energetic. There were guys like Chris Brown, there were guys like Omarion, there was guys like Asha, even the ladies, we had ladies like Ciara, and for me that really probably played a role in my desire to become a dancer at that point. Remember, I've just gotten saved, but I was still having a lot of influence from all these things that I was seeing. And I remember looking at Chris Brown and thinking, Chris Brown can act, Chris Brown can dance, Chris Brown can sing or sang. And on top of that, he was good with the ladies. And so I wanted to be like Chris Brown. Well, I don't know if he became like Chris Brown, but what I know is I was able to sing, I was able to dance, and I've been able to act. And so when I came to Nairobi now, but before I came to Nairobi, one of the things that now built me up when I was in Nakuru was where I learned to practice. That was where I learned to work hard to what I want, because I remember I would practice till like around 11, 12, midnight, just looking at these movies. And all of this came at a cost, because one of the costs was my mom probably never fully understood. I've had supportive parents, but like every mom, as in they're wondering why are you going every time and I need your help at home. And so we had these constant fights back and forth with my parents. And I know for them, they believed that, akienda Nairobi kierere ya dance itaisha. Wapi. Hapa ndo nilikuja sasa kudance vizuri. And came to campus, and that's probably where now my love for dance and my gift really grew because I went to this school called KCA University, but joined a dance crew that was in Nairobi University. And that did a couple of things for me. One, it made my love for dance grow. But the other thing is, it really affected my social life because while most of my classmates would hang out after school, I would literally leave school to go and dance with these guys. And then for this dance crew, it was called Undignified. For the people who are wondering, Undignified comes from 2 Samuel 6:22, where David was dancing, whoop, whoop, and he said that I'll become even more undignified than this in the presence of these slave girls you speak of. And so while these guys were hanging out, in a ministry called Salt at that time in Mamlaka Chapel, I'd go back home because I used to live away from Nairobi University. And so you'd find that during the day I was a student, during the nights or evening I was a dancer. And that went on. It's one of the things that really taught me was perseverance, because I remember there's this period where I was in the middle of an exam season and I was in the middle of a competition. And that was one of the hardest moments because I had to make a choice. Do I do what everyone does and focus on the education side, or do I do both? The crazy me did both. The first time we had tried, we were pathetic. Like, have you been so bad that even your coach or team leader who's not dancing comes to you and says, you guys are bad. You guys are bad. And I remember just taking the marking scheme for the next year, and during practice, nilikuwa na practice analytically. Not just passionately, but also analytically. I'd look and be like, so we need synchrony. Guys, we need to be synchronized. We need energy. And then there was this team leader of ours, he's called Steve. Maze, tulikuwa tunamuitanga teketeke. The reason tulianza kumuita teketeke ni sababu alitukimbizanga field. I have never loved and hated someone at the same time like that. Because, we do laps in the field, and then just when you're tired, he'd be like, okay, so now we're doing sprints. I'm like, what? And then after the sprints, we start doing some jumping jacks and some exercises and some cardio and some calisthenics. And then just when you're gassed out, he's like, so we are doing 5 runs of every song that we are doing in the competition with energy. We used to call it Monday torture chambers. And we were tired. I remember also doing practice at 3 a.m. on the basketball court with the team. But then all this paid off because we ended up winning the competition. And what that did was it boosted my confidence and it grew our presence, even in church, because you could see how people started to take notice of the fact that there's actually a dance crew in this church. Even as I was finishing up on my education, one of the things that also happened was I started to sort of gain some level of recognition. One of the most defining moments in my life was when I went to a mission to Germany. And in this mission, I got to meet some amazing guys. I got to meet a singer called Andy Mburu. Now, for the new guys who might not know who that is, there's this song called Anani Jali, Sitoku Bali, Kuzama kwenye maji, Anani Penda Yeni Mwema. That is Andy Mburu. And his producer at that point, who was called Alex Mully, and our worship leaders. And I just got to see how they lived life, and spending over a month with them, and then doing a tour of 13 concerts. And that made me dream. I was like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Kumbe Mungu, muona vile kakuku kanategangwa. Yani, you're just following mahindi. Unaekewa tu mahindi, unafuata tu, and then you find yourself in a trap. I feel like that's what God did with me. Because that thing made me dream. And I thought that was going to be my life forever. Then God was like, now that I have your attention, let's first of all start working on you. But you see, the thing is, at that point, you're 23, and all you hear most of the times is prosperity gospel or just salvation sermons, but rarely about what does God actually do with you as a human. And so after university, that's where now I can say that life took a different turn. And, again, remember, I've just come from Germany. There's been a good culture, there's been a good shift. I've learned how to interact with guys from different cultures. I've had a shift in my mindset because guys in Europe don't think the same way we do. And so I come back, I'm fired up, but I don't think I was prepared at that point. And the reason I'm saying this is because when I came back, like most Christians, I focused on the promise of God, not the growth. And I still grew, and I still tried as much as possible to grow. But I think I was so focused on what I hoped and wanted and thought God had told me that I forgot that God's promises comes with terms and condition, and it's for his glory. It's not just for us to get it. And so coming back, that's when I started to now really experience loss. Coming from a point of winning a competition, being probably the most known person in your circle, and being able to pay your team, to not having work for over a year. And when you get work, it's like you're being paid peanuts, like 500 baht per class, and you only have like one class in that whole year. Also going through a very nasty breakup that was damaging in a way. There's also a lot of health issues at that point. I used to just walk and feel dizzy without a lot of explanation. And the worst part is you're going to the doctors and they're like, you're actually fit. I don't know why you're facing these problems. And also just having a bit of family issues here and there. Like most people, I mean, as you grow up, you realize this is normal. But as a 20-something, some of these things look really huge. And what all of this did was it made me have this fight with God that lasted for about 7 years. And the worst part about it is after a few months, you reduce the number of people you talk to. After 1 or 2 years, you stop talking about it because, you look like you're not moving forward. But one of the downsides about that is it eats you up inside. All this pain, all this hurt, all these struggles eat you up inside. Publicly, people are seeing the wins. People are seeing, the international projects. People are seeing the growth as a dancer. People are seeing, oh, this guy is actually following his dreams. That's what publicly people are seeing. But then behind the scenes, what's actually happening is there's a lot of bitterness, there's a lot of brokenness, there's a lot of brokenness, there is a lot of pain. What this did is it led me to a period where I faced depression like 3 different times. One of those times was between the period of 2013 and 2015, where nothing was working and I just felt like I was struggling. I was being left behind in life. And that was painful. It was hurtful. I didn't know how to tell my parents. I didn't know how to tell my friends. Even people I used to live with at that point, I didn't know how to share it with them. And I ended up being a complainer. I ended up probably not being the best company. I came from being the life of the party where everyone wants to hang out with to lonely and broken and lost. That 7-year period where I faced these 3 separate seasons of depression, it was tough. And as I said, publicly, I'm singing and I'm always the smiling guy on stage. There's just this thing about the creative space, dance, music, that you can hide behind your gift. You can hide behind the smile. You can hide behind the joy. And you see this even with guys like, I believe it was called, there was Twitch, the dancer, who committed suicide. There was Robin Williams, who also committed suicide. It's ironical that the people who bring joy in this world that are sometimes the most broken. And I can relate to that because for 7 years I was broken. But the interesting thing is the person or the creator I was fighting with at that point was also the same reason that I was standing. Without God carrying me through, I don't think I would have come this far, because there are times when I literally had nothing but God. And I know this sounds cliche, oh, Christians say it, but for me, there's no way I can explain it that maybe you can understand. But for me, that's what kept me. And I feel like God covered my shame publicly as he was molding me behind the scenes. I feel like this years of struggle was him building me up, but at that point I didn't see it like that. All I saw was the pain, all I saw was the hurt, all I saw was the failures, the disappointments. But behind all of these things, God was also building me up. Because if I look at the number of things I've been able to do while broken, just makes me wonder what I can do when I'm okay, you know. And some of the things were, in this 7 year period, some of the visions I've had were birthed. Visions like His Love My Story, which is a ministry concert aimed at telling stories through dance. Inspire concerts aimed at giving the next generation of dancers and talent and students a chance to be able to showcase their gifts, something that I probably didn't have a lot in my time. I've also been able to work with amazing people like Dr. Julissa Rowe, who has held my hand and guided me, especially into the acting space, where I've been able to work with big names in the industry, and that has really made me glad. And also being able to join the worship team in this season as well in our church called Mamlaka El Chapel, and grow musically, grow in my love for music, though I've hated my voice as well. There was this concert where I butchered a song while we were on tour. And I think from that point until probably recently, I have not loved my voice at all. Ironically, that's what pays my bills. But, coming from that point to even having 2 songs on Spotify, one is a rap. You can go check it out. Go check out Samuregz on Spotify. But then some of the painful moments were also, the loss of my mom, who passed on in 2018. And then, ironically, having one of the best years of my life in 2020 financially, and not knowing how to balance all of this and having to go through therapy. So basically, this was just a carafe season. And by the time we were getting to 2020, I wanted to quit. I was done. I was like, this is not for me. And I remember we used to try and do this online conversations on Instagram with my boy Dominion, who has also been instrumental in me standing to this point. Yeah, again, 2021, not being able to pay my bills, being homeless. I was in my second bout of depression. Remember the first bout was like huko 2013. Hii sasa ilikuwa imekuja bail mpya ya depression. I'm saying it like it's a light thing, but it's not. And I was in bed and I was about to give up. And then this song came. It's called Together by For King and Country. And I just remember thinking, this song is so deep. Let me try do something with it. And I called 7 of my friends and I was like, do you guys mind doing this project with me? I don't think any of them knew I was in depression at that point. They agreed. For me, that lit up a spark in my life, and I'll tell you why. It lit up a spark because For King and Country didn't just see this video, they sponsored it. They ended up doing a remix. That was a dance remix. I always say I inspired a Grammy Award winning band to do a dance remix of a song. And on top of that, we were part of it. And from this, I ended up also making a friend from the US. He's called Joel Casanova. He'll be in one of the podcasts, by the way. Promise. I think that helped me to not quit because I ended up doing an online workshop in the US 3 years in a row. And so by the time I was coming to 2021, even though I couldn't pay my bills, the dream had started to be reignited again. And so moving back to my brother's place, being able to just first of all stop drowning, and then now building deck to what it is today. I can say that in the highs and the lows, all these things that have happened, the good, the bad, have served a purpose. They've served a purpose because I wouldn't be able to have this podcast without that journey. I wouldn't be able to know how to give back to dancers without this journey. That mission statement of initiating change, giving hope, inspiring would just be a statement. But now I know how it feels to be hopeless. And because of that, I hope that I can be a reason for someone to have hope. I know how it feels to be broken. I know how it feels to be broke. I know it feels to not pay my bills and have the fear that I will sleep in the streets. And if it wasn't for my brother, I'd actually be sleeping in the streets for a season. And so I think that I've gotten to a place where I have a passion for dancers, a passion for visionaries, a passion for couples. Because if we start talking about now my love life, that's another just crazy journey that we don't have today. But also without that journey, I'd not have found my wife. Huh? Love you, baby. Yeah. So everything that has happened for a reason. And I know this statement sounds so cliche. And to be honest with you, when you're going through that journey, that's not the best statement to ever give anyone. I can say it now because I'm on the other side. But if you came to me in that season, I would have told you, please don't say it. So before you go to that disclaimer, if you've ever told anyone who's hurting that this is happening for a reason, please stop. Just be their friend. But yeah, like all these things have served a purpose to make me who I am today. But the thing about this journey as well is, as much as I have grown, and when I say I've grown, like I said, I've worked with international artists, over 60 weddings, over 40 corporate events, countless other social events, been able to do over 20 of my own events. One of the things that has also been clear to me is, for me to be able to grow, for me to be able to elevate, I need to learn. And it's one thing to learn from books. It's one thing to look at podcasts. But what about the people around me? You know, is this something that they face? Is this something that people around me face? What do they do when they are broken? What do they do when they are broke? What do they do when they are hurting? And all of this is just a snippet. I know it's been over 30 minutes, but all of this is just a snippet as to why I have started this podcast. And so, like I said, this podcast is for me to learn just as much as it is for you guys to learn. I'm hoping that as I seek answers, as I'm on a journey to grow, as I'm on a journey to become better, that somewhere along the way, I can use this to end up being the person that God created me to be. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That was the reason for me having this podcast. There's quite a number of things I haven't said. There's quite a number of issues I've left out. Some of them because I'm not used to sharing my story. Actually, this is a stretch. But I'm hoping that through this, you will be inspired. If today's message resonated with you, kindly hit the like button, share this with a friend that you believe in, and don't forget to subscribe. We'd also like to connect with you, so you can follow us at Believe Become Inspire Podcast on Instagram or at Samuregz on every social media platform. Till next time, keep believing, keep becoming, and never stop inspiring.